Hello everybody, this is Fernando for the latest Ghosts and Spirits video. Alright, let's go ahead and let's do another entry here, once again based on one of your newer suggestions. This one having to do with a house that's located there in England that is considered one of the most haunted houses within that entire area. In fact, when I was reading the information associated with this case, there's a multitude of ghosts, including a fascinating one associated with an animal-like ghost that I'll talk about more here in a minute. Definitely something that sounded very interesting with me because it's very rare that you hear about ghostly animals. But such is the case here with this house, which again is just one part of the many hauntings associated with it. But it has to do with this. You're looking at a picture of the house now. So in this case, let's talk about the house itself. It's known as the Haunting of Abbey House. So here's all the information associated with, again, one of the most haunted houses within all of England. So here's how the story goes. This is a very old house. Even though it was apparently finalized, like in terms of its true structures and its building in the 17th century, the idea is it could have actually been built even much sooner than that. In fact, around in the 1580s to be specific. Imagine that you have something here that is almost 500 years old, and that's how this house stands as of today. In fact, if you wanted to find the exact location of it, it's right there in Cambridge University. Apparently, it's in one of the corners located there, and when you visit it, it looks like cordoned off and so on, but people still operate out of that house to this day. I love old houses like that, just the history associated with it. Here in the United States, of course, probably the oldest houses go into the 1800s, but this one potentially could be from the 1500s, and there are remnants of it from the 1500s still there to this day. Just amazing history. But it didn't take long after it was built. In fact, if you wanted to go into like the 1800s or so, and once everything was finalized, that purported sightings and haunted experiences started to happen with this household. There was a bunch of supernatural experiences that occurred starting at that point, going into the 1900s, and then even to this day, people still state that there's funny things that happen at that location, all by a different set of ghosts. And thankfully, some of the most well-documented cases happen to be with the Lawson family, who ended up living there for a good time period. A guy by the name of Professor Lawson lived there with his family as he was teaching there at that university, or he was living there doing something else with that university. But either way, though, on the very first night that they encountered a set of hauntings, it was just pretty much there going forward. And a lot of it was thankfully documented by Mrs. Lawson, who was able to stay at that house longer, and she was able to keep well track of it. But yes, some of the hauntings associated with this household are this. Again, from the very first night, there were these very loud banging sounds that would occur on the doorways to their rooms. Apparently, the banging sounds would start at the very top of the doorway, and they would methodically go downward towards the bottom of the doorway. So imagine that going up and down in a rhythmic fashion, it having such a strong effect that to the family and everyone there within the rooms, it seemed like it was almost like the hinges were going to be ripped straight from the wall themselves. Of course, when they looked out, they didn't see anything. Nothing as far as any person that could have done this, no animal that could have done this. But that was their very first experience. And then after that, there were also howlings that people would hear within the household. There were more bangings that would occur here and there, including the shuffling of feet. In fact, at one point, one of the Lawsons, the brother there, stated that when he heard the commotion associated, get this, with a ghost tripping over his boots. Apparently, this ghost was walking around his room, and when that happened, there were these large boots by his bedside, and all of a sudden, he heard the real-life commotion. Like, imagine if someone ran into boots, and then they tripped over themselves. That's exactly what he heard. But when he looked up, that's when he realized there was nobody there. These strange sounds just seemed to be more on the lines of something invisible that just happened to be having a physical contact with his boots. How about that? That's definitely a first when it comes to that. Normally you hear about ghosts being able to just pass through things and not have any kind of physical effect on what their surroundings are. But here in this case, that definitely occurred with that guy's boots. Other strange sounds happened for months on end. People would say that they would hear just constant footsteps happening in some of the stairways, especially those that are outside the bedrooms. Of course, they would look out and they would see nothing as far as that. And then eerier thing happened with this. One of the ghosts was able to apparently make themselves visible, and they nicknamed this ghost the nun. This was a woman, a womanly shaped ghost, someone who had a very long dark robe, and she had a semi-transparent form. In fact, it was considered more solid than anything else. This was important because on a nightly basis, she would appear usually between midnight and 4 a.m. to many of the Lawson family members there. It involved Mrs. Lawson. I believe Mr. Lawson was involved as well. It involved the children too. They would state that they would see this woman just casually walk around their bedrooms, sometimes from one door to another, sometimes just staring at them from the foot of the bed. And on one other occasion, this nun was actually trying to touch the foot of one of the Lawsons. I believe it was the brother once again. And when that happened, she almost touched the foot, but then moved away, went into the nearby window, and just outright disappeared. Of course, when people tried to see what was happening, like they went to that location where the nun was at, there was nobody there. Nobody was there. Nobody had, like, the windows would be closed, doors would be closed, so there would be no explanation as to how this mysterious nun was able to get in and out, other than, of course, it being a supernatural experience. Unfortunately, there's no history as far as those ghosts, including the nun, as to why they're there. Nobody could ascertain anything as to solving the mystery as to why they happen to be haunting that household, other than the fact that they could have been people that were around that neighborhood before and they ended up dying somewhere nearby, and then they visited this house, or maybe they were previous dwellers of some sort within that area in that household before it was built, and then when that happened, they just moved and decided to just stay in that area. But no, as far as this nun, it was one of the first solid light ghosts that was experienced there. The other one, though, is this, and this was again the one that I was hinting at a little bit earlier. There was a weird animal-like creature that started to be encountered by the Lawsons, and this creature not only made its presence known to the adults, but also more commonly to the children there. In fact, it was nicknamed Wolfie because of its animal-like structure. And the way it looked like was this. It was considered almost like a large rabbit, but with very, very short ears. And the most curious thing about it was always on its hind legs. So imagine like Bugs Bunny, basically, but with smaller ears and obviously looking more of an animal than a cartoon. But there it was, walking on its hind legs, and in other situations, it was heard running throughout the several rooms and seen running throughout by the children themselves as well. In fact, it was the Lawson's son named John who was one of the first to be able to see this creature. There it was, standing in the middle of the room, and then it was just looking at him, and he seemed to see it and others did not. Gives you the idea that maybe this wolfy creature was something that could make itself appear just to certain people. But either way, though, he pointed at it, asked his mother where that thing was, like what was it exactly. And when they looked at it, they saw that it was there by the window, and then it ran out. Except when they expected the window was closed, and there was nothing else obviously that would have allowed this creature, whatever this Wolfie was, to have gone in or out without them seeing its official entry. And so that was one of the very first sightings of this Wolfie. In fact, not only was it nicknamed Wolfie, but they also nicknamed it the little brown thing because of its unique character. I guess the fur associated with it was a brownish hue. And then, they would see this after the nun experience. They would see this Wolfie creature too. By the way, one quick note on the nun. Apparently, Mrs. Lawson at one point got so tired of this nun visiting her that the last she heard of it and saw of it was there once again at her bedroom, just staring at her from the bed itself. And she ordered it. Like she said the sign of the cross, she said a blessing, and then this nun walked into another area there by the doorway and then disappeared, was never to be seen again. So maybe when this nun left, that was when this Wolfie creature decided to take over. Good news is the Wolfie creature was not seen as being malicious or anything else bad. In fact, it was almost at a point where there were multitudes of these Wolfies there. In fact, they would hear them scuttering. Let's say if they were in the top area, second floor type stuff, they would hear these things scuttering within the first floor, and then when they went downwards, they wouldn't see anything afterward. And so that's where they would describe, are these wolves? Are these some other type of creatures? Was it a cat? Was it a dog? It's been argued at one point. In fact, there was apparently a dog that used to live in that location before the Lawsons did, that was trained. This was sometime around the 1700s. It was trained to be able to walk on its hind legs. So the notion is that it's possible that this Wolfie was in fact this pet dog. It was someone that lived there in that household during the 1700s, ended up dying in that household, and then its ghost just decides to scurry around that location to this very day. In fact, after the Lawsons moved out in 1911, other people that moved in afterwards started to see this Wolfie as well. They would go there, they would hear it scuttering, they would see it running. Obviously, this was a very unique sight. Again, imagine a larger than life rabbit with short ears running around on its hind legs, and that's essentially what you would describe and see with this Wolfie encounter. But yeah, these are the most prominent ones that stand out with regards to the most haunted house, again, associated there in England. How about that? When it comes to the Abbey House, you have those unnamed, unseen ghosts, the ones that are completely invisible, that were causing all those banging sounds and howlings, in other words, and the stairways and the doors. And then you had the nun, and then you had now this Wolfie creature. And then people, of course, say that there's other ghosts there as well. And so other fascinating stuff, that this is, again, well merited when it comes to it being the most haunted house in all of England, and to this day still seems to have those type of reports there too. But that's pretty much it. That's all the information I could find and then tie into this video with regards to this location. If anyone has been there before, maybe there in Cambridge, in the college or university, maybe somewhere nearby this house, and seen it from afar, or maybe even have been lucky enough to go inside it, let me know. Post it in the comments as well. Definitely love to see what your thoughts are. Again, this is a place that is still being used to this day. It looks functional. There's cars outside. There's like electricity and lights, and obviously like living spaces inside. So there's bound to be some news stories associated with these hauntings. And so definitely it would be a bucket list of sorts if I was ever somewhere there in England to be able to go see this household. But all right, everybody, thanks again as always. Take care.